Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I want to thank your provost, Dr. Tom Peterson, for inviting me to come out to UC Merced. Tom and I had the opportunity to work together when he was at the National Science Foundation, and we worked on a number of things that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to cover two topics. One is for those of you who have not been following science and technology policy for your entire adult life, try to give you a little sense about what it is that our office actually does, and in particular to explain one of our roles, which is to serve as a policy entrepreneur. So in the same way that a venture capitalist is looking for high quality idea flow, they're constantly, they're reading lots of business plans and they're looking for some opportunities to make investments. We're playing that same role at the national level in saying, all right, given what the president wants to accomplish, what are some things that we think the White House should get behind in a serious way? And I'm going to give you some examples of some of the initiatives that the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, working very closely with agencies like the National Science Foundation, like DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the NIH, NASA, the Department of Energy, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, a broad range of agencies that play a role in issues related to science, technology, and innovation. And then I'm also going to give you a case study in a little bit more detail around the Big Data Initiative, which is something that the administration started in March of 2012. So the notion of policy entrepreneurs is something that political scientists have started to pay attention to. And here's a quote from two of them who say, highly motivated individuals or small teams can do much to draw attention to policy problems, present innovative policy solutions, build coalitions of supporters, and secure legislative action. And the only thing that I would amend on this is that a lot of the things that we do, in some cases we decide the right thing to do is to work with Congress on legislation. But in other instances, it's things that the executive branch agencies already have the ability to do with their existing resources, or coalitions that we build with the private sector, with companies, with research universities, with foundations and nonprofit organizations. So once we decide, hey, this is an idea that we really think is important and that should be elevated and should be a presidential priority, we have a wide variety of tools that we use to make progress on a particular issue. And that could include everything from an executive order that the president signs and directs agencies to take some particular action, the preparation of the president's budget, working with Congress on legislation, presidential events, and particularly the State of the Union, which is the highest profile speech that the president gives in which he lays out his agenda for the coming year. The ability to convene, to bring together not only the agencies, but individuals and organizations outside the government. So one of the essay questions that I pose to the members of my team is, if you were President Obama and you could call anyone and ask them to do something, who would you call and what would you ask them to do? And if we can answer that question, then we can begin to figure out, for a given issue, what's the coalition that we need to build in order to make progress on that particular issue. Interagency coordination, personnel decisions across the government, and using advisory committees. So we have, for example, we have something called the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, and it's a number of people. It's co-chaired by Eric Lander, who's one of the leading people in genomics, was a leader in the Human Genome Project, and people of that stature who, if we have a question or the president has a question, they can pull together a group of experts in that field and within a relatively short period of time get us a report that will explain the nature of the challenge and opportunity and what they think we should do about it. So those are a couple of examples of the ways in which we get things done. Now, the issue that I focus on is the President's innovation strategy, which really has three major components. The first is, and this is talking about, what is the role of the federal government in creating the right environment for science, technology, and innovation, and ultimately economic growth and job creation. And we think there are three important roles. One is to invest in the building blocks of long-term economic growth and job creation, things like research, education, and infrastructure, which really provides the foundation for everything else. The second is how do we create the right environment for private sector innovation so that they're investing in research and development and new businesses and plant and equipment. And finally, how do we harness innovation to address national problems, like making the transition to a low-carbon economy. If we want to stabilize greenhouse gases, we're going to have to figure out how to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases by 80%. How do we get that done? Using renewables and low-carbon fuels and improved energy efficiency. Or how do we, one of the topics I'm going to come back to is what are the moonshots of the 21st century? In the same way that President Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon by the end of the decade and have him safely return, what are the equivalents of that in the 21st century? So this is an overview of what it is that we're trying to achieve through the President's innovation strategy. And what I'm going to talk about is some examples of particular projects that OSTP has been pushing to try to advance that. So one is the Materials Genome Initiative that the President announced in a speech he gave at Carnegie Mellon University in June of 2011. And the goal of this project is to reduce the time required to discover, develop, and manufacture new materials by at least 50%. Because currently that process takes 15 to 20 years. Scientists and engineers have ideas using modeling and simulation, machine learning, informatics, high throughput synthesis and characterization that could dramatically reduce that. And that's important because if you look at a problem like energy, we need new materials for photovoltaics and for thermoelectrics and for new batteries. And if it takes us 15 to 20 years, we're going to have a difficult time addressing these national problems. The National Robotics Initiative announced in the same speech a collaboration between NSF and the NASA and NIH and USDA and a number of other agencies, in particular looking at the problem of human-robotic collaboration. The BRAIN Initiative, which is something that President Obama announced personally in April of this year, an idea that grew out of multidisciplinary discussions between people in neuroscience and nanoscience, where the neuroscientists were saying, we don't really understand how the brain works because we can't measure the electrical and chemical activities, not just of a few hundred neurons, but millions of neurons that together make up neural circuits. And if we had that ability, that would dramatically improve our understanding of how the brain works and ultimately how to do a better job of diagnosing, treating, and preventing diseases of the brain. Convergence. A growing number of universities are beginning to look at what are the research opportunities that are at the intersection of life sciences, the physical sciences, and engineering. Something called the US Ignite Partnership, again, that we've worked closely with the National Science Foundation on, which is now that we have these very high-speed networks, national research networks of up to 100 gigabits per second, gigabit per second networks going all the way to individual homes and businesses. What are the new applications that we can develop that will take advantage of that kind of bandwidth? An effort to called Educate to Innovate to dramatically increase the number of young people who are interested in the so-called STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math. So, for example, one of the things that the president said was, you know, if you win the Super Bowl or the NCAA, you get to come to the White House. The same thing should be true if you win the Intel Science Fair or you win the first robotics competition. So every year he has a science fair in the White House, and an amazing group of kids show up and show the president what it is that they've been able to do. One year he interacted with a 16-year-old who was already figuring out how to use functionalized gold nanoparticles to develop smart anti-cancer therapeutics that deliver drugs only to tumors while leaving healthy cells untouched. And I don't know about you, but I wasn't working on a cure for cancer when I was 16. I think I was playing Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. Another initiative as part of our STEM efforts we have is called 100K in 10. This is an effort to prepare and recruit 100,000 high-quality math and science teachers over the next 10 years. And we've also gotten very excited about the maker movement. How many people have been to a maker fair? Okay, so one of the really interesting things that's happening is that the tools that are necessary to design and make just about anything are becoming increasingly democratized. So in the maker fair in the Bay Area, 120,000 people show up for that. There are maker spaces and hacker spaces and fab labs and tech shops that are springing up all over the country. And you can see that's Joey, and he's developed a marshmallow cannon that took much to the delight of the Secret Service, took a marshmallow and fired it across the east room of the White House, and the president's going, whoa. This is something really interesting that we're paying a lot of attention to. High-skill immigration, the president is pushing hard on comprehensive immigration reform, and as part of that, we're looking at how do we make it easier for foreign students who come here and get a STEM degree from our universities to actually stay in the country if they choose to do that, and also to address a broader set of immigration priorities around creating a path to citizenship and things like the DREAM Act. Startup America, we have an effort to encourage and promote high-growth entrepreneurship. And we have a three-part strategy that is looking at what can we do in the absence of new legislation, how can we work with Congress to pass legislation, and what are the opportunities for the private sector to take the lead on this issue to promote and encourage high-growth entrepreneurship. And you can see the president signing a bill, and behind him is Eric Cantor, who's a majority leader on the House Republican side. And so this is not something that happens every day. And how many of you have ever gone to a crowdfunding website like Kickstarter or Indiegogo? Okay, so what this legislation is going to allow is that those crowdfunding sites, you're either making a donation or you are pre-ordering a product that some entrepreneur is promising to create, or maybe it's maybe it's art, maybe it's not a product or something. And what this will eventually allow, and the regulations will probably be finalized next year, is for small investors to make equity-based investments in companies that will make it easier for an entrepreneur who has a good idea to be able to raise the money from large numbers of small investors. We have, I know that a number of you are involved in the Blum Center for Developing Economies. I have people on my team that are looking at how do we harness innovation for global development, looking at things like mobile financial services, which are really starting to take off in developing countries, in some cases at a much faster rate than they're occurring in the United States. And we also have an effort to encourage the use of incentive prizes. How many of you have heard of the X Prize? Okay, so the idea behind an incentive prize is different from the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize and prizes like that recognize you for work that you've already done. So, think about Higgs, who just got the Nobel Prize. That awarded him for something he'd done like 50 years ago. This rewards you for doing something that hasn't been done yet. So Charles Lindbergh made the first transatlantic flight in response to a $25,000 prize from a New York hotel owner named Ortigue, who thought that if people would start flying from North America to Europe, that would be good for the hotel business. And he actually did that first flight in response to this prize, and that led to a takeoff in civil aviation. So what we've been able to do, and these are some of the advantages of a prize as opposed to traditional grant or contract. For example, you only have to pay if someone is successful. You can establish a goal without specifying in advance who's most likely to win. And you can get people from different fields to solve a problem. So we were able to work with Congress to pass legislation that gives every agency the authority to support these prizes of up to $50 million. And if you go to challenge.gov, 58 agencies have supported close to 300 of these challenges at this point. So this is becoming one of the ways in which we're seeking to promote innovation. Now, another effort that we have, as I said earlier, is the identification and pursuit of grand challenges. So you can think of these as what are the moonshots of the 21st century. And so another example is sequencing the human genome. When that project first started off, the first one cost $100 million. It's now gone below 10,000 and is rapidly approaching $1,000. So this is really changing the way we think about doing medicine and drug development. And obviously, this is one of the fields that is generating lots of data. So this relates to the big data initiative that I'm going to be talking about. So in addition to the government, we're also seeing companies beginning to embrace big, hairy, audacious goals. So Google is working on a self-driving car that could dramatically reduce traffic fatalities. That is an outgrowth of an earlier DARPA Grand Challenge. IBM has driven advances in cognitive computing by beating Garry Kasparov at chess and Ken Jennings at Jeopardy. Qualcomm has an X Prize for a tricorder, like on Star Trek, that could do a diagnosis of a dozen diseases. And Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, has said, I want to die on Mars, but not on impact. So his modest goal is to make humanity a multi-planetary species. So these are some of the attributes of a grand challenge: significant impact in some area of national and global priority, ambitious but achievable. So if I said, my grand challenges is I want immortality and the end of scarcity, that would certainly be ambitious, but wouldn't score very well on the achievable. And it has to be compelling. I mean, one of the goals of a grand challenge is really to capture the public imagination. So if you said, I want to increase the efficiency with which we do programming of many core processors, that's something that is very important from a technical point of view, but it's not the type of problem that is likely to galvanize the public in the same way that the Apollo project did or the Human Genome Project did. So what we're trying to do now is to increase the number of organizations, both inside and outside the government, that are involved in the identification and pursuit of a grand challenge. And so some universities, for example, teaming up with the National Academy of Engineering, are allowing their undergraduates to organize their coursework, research, service learning, and international experience around one of the 14 grand challenges identified by the National Academy of Engineering. And as President Kennedy said, by defining our goal more clearly, by making it seem more manageable and less remote, we can help all peoples to see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly towards it. So when the President Obama in April unveiled the BRAIN initiative, we began to hear from all these research groups all over the country talking about how that goal, that ambitious goal, was encouraging more multidisciplinary collaboration to achieve the goals of the BRAIN initiative. As I said, we're trying to get more people involved and make grand challenges a more prominent part of American popular culture and conversations about the future. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is go into a little bit more detail about one of the initiatives that we've been working on, which is called big data. And people have a lot of definitions of big data. One is just, one I think interesting one is to look at 3 or 4 V's, not only the volume, but the variety. That is that, you've got structured and unstructured information. You've got not only data, but text and images and other multimedia forms of data, and velocity. That is, the data can be coming at you in real time, and you're trying to use that data to make real-time decision making. But I think one of the most important things that we sometimes forget is that the goal is not big data per se. It's creating this pipeline to go from data to knowledge to action. And that data by itself is a cost. And it's only when we use the data to inform some decision or get some new insight that it actually adds value. So I think the only problem with big data as a phrase is sometimes it gets us to focus on, how much data we have, as if, well, I've got 500 terabytes of data. And I mean, fundamentally, I think that's uninteresting unless we figure out how we're going to create this pipeline of going from data to knowledge to action. So some of the reasons that we're interested in this is the economic impact. We're already seeing research from economists showing that firms that are better at big data and analytics are more productive. We're seeing lots of instances in which data is accelerating the pace of discovery in science and engineering. Think about the impact that it's having in astronomy, where these large digital sky surveys are having a transformative impact on the field. Health. How do we get better care at lower costs? How do we combine electronic health records and mobile health data and data from genomics and other forms of omics to create an infrastructure for clinical research and drug discovery? Education. Traditionally, education has been a data-poor domain. You get a report card once a semester. That's not a very data-rich domain. But if educational institutions are moving to adopt online and blended learning, and by instrumenting the online learning environment, you're collecting all the information associated with the student interacting with online content, synchronous and asynchronous collaboration with faculty and peers, and not only a final exam, but embedded assessment, then you're collecting a lot more information about the learning experience, and we should be able to use that to drive continuous improvement. So in the same way that the Amazon recommender system gets better as more people use it, online courses should get better the more students use them. Smart grid and energy efficiency applications, real-time labor market information. These are just a couple of examples of potential applications of big data that the administration is excited about. So what's the government role in this? Well, one is obviously to invest in R&D that is related to big data technologies like scalable algorithms for machine learning or information visualization. Expanding the big data workforce. So there are a lot of projections out there about how many more data scientists and workers who have some familiarity with how to take advantage of big data we're going to need. Supporting applications of big data in national priorities. These are a couple of examples of the government role. Dealing with some of the privacy issues. And making more government data available. So, you know, you think about NOAA, all of the data that they have made available has allowed for the private sector to develop value-added applications that use that data for better weather forecasting or things like the Weather Channel. So the president signed an executive order earlier this year telling agencies that the default should be that you make your data available so that it can be downloaded in bulk and so that it can be machine readable. That is, that it's, you know, you don't want to make your information available in PDF because then it's difficult for a computer to be able to process that information. You want to make that data in a form so that it can be easily ingested by a computer. And we want to be a catalyst for investments by the private sector. So this effort really started in March of 2012 with over $200 million of investments in R&D that is related to both related to big data. There was a DARPA program called XData. There was a joint solicitation between the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. The Department of Energy funded an institute in scientific visualization. NIH, together with the European Bioinformatics Institute, started the 1,000 Genomes project, making that available on the Amazon Web Service. Then NIH, earlier this year, in July, significantly ramped up their investment. They're now talking about supporting 6 to 8 big data centers of excellence to the tune of $24 million a year to both develop better tools for data sharing, integration, analysis, and management, but also to prepare students and researchers to be able to take advantage of these new data science methods. They're recruiting an associate director for data science, and they're trying to figure out how to create a data catalog so that researchers can find all of the biomedical data that the National Institutes of Health have paid for. So one of the things that we always try to do is if the federal government is going to make an investment, how do we have that serve as a catalyst for not only actions that the federal government can take, but other organizations, and that could be companies, regions, universities, foundations, nonprofits, to make the most of the new opportunities that are created by big data. And we're actually going to be doing an event later this month that celebrates some of these new commitments that these types of organizations have been willing to make. So, for example, you could think of universities creating new courses and courses of study. So a number of institutions are creating master's programs related to big data. University industry collaborations, like UC Berkeley, funded by NSF, and 17 industry collaborators has something called the AMP Lab, which stands for Algorithms, Machines, and People. Massachusetts is creating a regional effort called the Massachusetts Data Initiative. Foundations are exploring applications of this, like automated student assessment. Companies are open sourcing some of their big data software. Companies are also looking at data philanthropy. So a French telecom company has made 2.5 billion anonymized cell phone records from Côte d'Ivoire available to the research community to begin to understand how you would use mobile data to better understand economic and social development in developing countries. And collaborations with big data-oriented nonprofits. So there's an organization called DataKind that is encouraging companies to loan some of their data scientists to work on a problem that a nonprofit has. We're seeing collaborations to try to demonstrate the value of big data. So one is, how could we do a better job of identifying those patients that have risk factors for stroke, heart attack, and diabetes, and intervening before they get these diseases as opposed to waiting until they show up at the hospital. And helping with the national agenda setting. So what are some of the specific actions? And so one example of this that some of your colleagues in the other UCs have done Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz, they have proposed a project for a 1 million cancer genome initiative. And what they did was to say, well, what are the potential advantages if we did this in terms of precision medicine and development of targeted therapies that are optimized for a particular type of tumor? What are all the technical challenges that we'd have to solve in terms of compression, database architecture, and how would we measure progress in the field of cancer genomics? So engineering makes progress when there are widely accepted benchmarks that we use to evaluate research results. How much would it cost? What are some of the privacy issues? How might you fund it? And then how would you bring together patients, academic medical centers, payers, and researchers? So that is very useful because it provides the administration with concrete ideas about some important opportunities and begins to answer the questions that we would need to understand in order to move an idea like this forward. So in short, we've made a large investment in research and development in 2012. Since then, other agencies like the National Institutes of Health have said, boy, this is really important. We're going to do even more. And our next step later this month is to highlight not only what the federal government is doing, but what universities, foundations, companies, nonprofits, regions, et cetera, can do to make the most of these opportunities. And I really think this is an exciting area, and I would love to get any comments or questions that you have, or any high-quality free advice that you'd like to offer as well. And thanks again, Tom, for the invitation, and look forward to answering any questions that you have.